welcome back to my channel. My name is Shelby and today I'm doing my weekly reading wrap-up from May 20th to the 26th. I read a total of 9 books, which is awesome. I read one arc and I also read a combo of romance, contemporary, as well as thriller mystery books. And I will link all these down below. I'd love to hear if you've read any of these and what you've been reading lately, and let's get right into it. The first book that I read is Imperfect Match by Corinne Michaels and Melanie Harlow. I've read books independently from Corinne Michaels as well as Melanie Harlow, but I've never read them as an author duo, and this is their second author duo book. They released one I think last year or the year before, and this one just sounded so cute. It's a friends to lovers romance between two people named Willow and Reed. So Willow is in her early 30s and she is ready to kind of settle down and have a baby. With or without a man, she's willing to kind of go through different measures to have a baby and kind of move on with her life. Willow works for her parents' matchmaking business and she's not so great at it, but she really wants to take over the business one day. And she has the guy who lives across the hall. His name is Reed and they're best friends and they are really different. He is the eternal bachelor, doesn't believe in marriage, and plans to never settle down. But Willow's mom has the idea that Willow could set Reed up with his perfect match, and not only will he find a soulmate and change his ways about love, but Willow will prove herself that she can find people matches and do well with the business. And so it is their story. It's basically Willow trying to set him up with his perfect match and in the process realizing she has feelings for him. So this was a really sugary sweet story. It wasn't very angsty, it wasn't too dramatic, it was just light and fluffy and exactly what I was looking for, and the perfect amount of steam as well. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next book that I had to talk about is The Mother's Mistake by Ruth Heald. This comes out June 11th. I got an arc through NetGalley, and this one is a mystery thriller about a woman named Claire. And Claire and her husband Matt have just recently moved to the countryside. They just had a baby and they moved to be closer to his mom. I think it's going to be great when they move there, have some help with the baby, but when they do, Claire is not feeling very welcomed by her mother-in-law and they're living in the grandma's old house and it's just really awkward for her. And while she's there, she just feels the walls closing in on her and thinks that someone is stalking her. But her husband, Matt, thinks she's crazy. And she keeps getting these notes left for her at her home. And someone knows what she did a few years ago. She's being haunted by her past. And you're wondering the whole time what happened in the past and what did Claire do that she's feeling so guilty over. And how is it relating to now and who is stalking her now. And I had an idea the whole time like who was responsible for the stalking, and I was right. But I like that I didn't know the circumstances surrounding it, so it still made it really fun to read, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next book that I read is Until It Fades by K.A. Tucker. Earlier this year I read The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker and I loved it, so I had to pick up another one of her novels. This one came out before The Simple Wild. I think it came out in 2017, and this is about a woman named Catherine. She is 24 years old and she's a single mother and she works as a waitress at a truck stop diner, and she struggles pretty hard in life and she's kind of a pariah in her town because when she was in high school something bad happened and everyone kind of didn't believe her and kind of blamed her and didn't like her, and she kind of got her name in the papers and she just had a really hard time. And now she's finally kind of moved past that, and she goes on this terrible blind date, first date with someone, and on her way home she encounters a car accident and the car is on fire and she saves a man's life, this huge guy, and she saves his life. She has no idea who he is, but afterwards she learns that he is a famous NHL player named Brett, and she does not want anything to do with it because she knows that it'll be in the paper and her name will be all over the news again. So she tries to keep her identity hidden, but of course her identity comes out and it is the romance between her and Brett. And she really struggles along the way with feeling like she is good enough because she feels like she's white trash. And he has money and he has fame, and why would he be interested in someone like her who doesn't have a lot? And so it is their romance, super slow burn. I really enjoyed it. I like how K.A. Tucker's books have more substance than just a service level romance. It's about way more than that, and I highly recommend this one. I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read is The Breakdown by B.A. Paris. This is B.A. Paris's second novel, and it's the last one that I have to read. And this is about a woman named Cass and her husband Matthew. So Cass is coming home one day after like a dinner party, and she takes a back road to go home quicker. And it's pretty dark out, and it's in the middle of the woods, and she encounters a car that's pulled over, and she sees a woman in the window, and she thinks to help her, but she doesn't really know who is waiting for her, and so she gets a little scared and she just keeps driving and leaves the woman behind. Well, the next day on the news they say that that woman was murdered on that road, and so she feels like really responsible for this woman being dead, and she feels like it's her fault, and that if she had stopped maybe she could have saved her. And she learns that she knew the woman, and so she starts really getting stressed out that the murderer maybe saw her and that the murderer is going to come after her. So she starts being very paranoid in her home. And she also is becoming increasingly forgetful. Her mother suffered from dementia at a really young age, so Cass is worried that she is meeting the same fate, and she's forgetting things like how to use the coffee maker, and did she leave the window open, and how did she use the washing machine. And she thinks she's losing her mind, and you're wondering all along, is she losing her mind? Is she just becoming an agoraphobic? Is she just being paranoid? And her husband believes she's paranoid. And you follow that story, and it was pretty good. I liked it. I don't love B.A. Paris's books. This one definitely is my favorite of B.A. Paris's novels. I think this one had the best twists and everything like that, but it was definitely not a favorite thriller. There's something about B.A. Paris that makes me keep wanting to read her books, but I'm not super excited about them. So yeah, I don't know. This one I gave 3.5 stars. The next one that I have to talk about is Roomies by Christina Lauren. This I checked out from my library, so I don't have the physical copy anymore. But this is about a woman named Holland who is an aspiring writer, and she's had a crush on a subway guitarist for 6 months. And so she takes the subway specifically just to see this guy, and basically after 6 months she figures out what his name is. His name is Calvin. And one day this homeless guy attacks her on the subway station, and Calvin saves her life, and she feels like pretty indebted to him. And so she tries to help him and get him to be noticed because he has really good musical talent, but he's just playing at the subway. And her uncle Robert happens to work with a play or a symphony or something, and he's needing a string musician. And so she says, hey, I know someone who plays a string guitar and you should hire him. And so they do an interview and they want to hire Calvin, but his visa is expired and he can't work legally in the US. So they have this bright idea that Holland and Calvin should get married just so he can work for Robert because he has so much talent, and it wouldn't really harm Holland because she doesn't have a boyfriend or anything. And of course she has some feelings for him, but Calvin has no idea, and it is their story. And it was pretty cute. It's really funny, and I really liked Calvin's personality, and I wish that we had dual perspective between Holland and Calvin, but we only saw through the perspective of Holland. And I think we really would have benefited from seeing his personality because he was really funny, and I thought I would love to see through his perspective. But even still, I liked this story. It wasn't my favorite Christina Lauren, but I still ended up getting it 4 stars. The next book I have to talk about is The Girl He Used to Know by Tracy Garvis Graves, and I was kindly gifted this by a friend on Goodreads, and so I have an ARC copy. And I read On the Island by this author, I think in May or in April, and I really liked it. And I was so stoked to pick this one up because I've heard nothing but amazing things. And this follows a woman named Annika, and she's in college in 1991, and she kind of struggles socially and has a hard time connecting with people and making friends. But she's been in this chess club ever since freshman year, and she loves it. And she usually plays with this one guy, but then one day she plays with a new guy named Jonathan, and it's kind of their romance, and they make a friendship and start dating. But you know that they break up because you're following 2 different timelines, 1991 and then a decade later in 2001, where they end up being both in Chicago together, and it's them kind of meeting up again and rekindling their romance. So you know that something tore them apart, and you know they come back together, and you're following these dual timelines. And this one I loved. It is very emotional, and something very emotional happens towards the end of the book, and I did see it coming about 100 pages toward the end, and I'm not sure if it was really twisty for some people, but I saw it coming. And it was very emotional, but happy to say that it had a positive ending, so it wasn't all just dark and dreary. But this one is so good, and if you've read this author before or you haven't, I would highly recommend this, and I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book that I have to talk about is For Better and Worse by Margot Hunt. I listened to this one on audiobook, and this one is my first Margot Hunt book, and I think she has one other book out, but this one is the one I've heard the most about, and I loved it, and I really liked it on audio. I'm usually, like I said, I'm not a huge audiobook person, but lately I've been trying to listen to them, and this one was great. Even my husband listened to some of it with me, and he really enjoyed it. And this is about a couple named Natalie and Will who meet in law school, and when they're on their first date, they have a really interesting first date conversation about how they could get away with murder because they are soon to be lawyers and they know about law and basically how to get away with murder, and they never think that they would actually have to do it. It's kind of a joke. And they end up getting married after college, and now it's 15 years later. They have a son named Charlie who's I think 10 or 11. And something really terrible happens. The principal of Charlie's school gets accused of molesting a child there, and the community is pretty outraged because they don't think that he would do that and they think the child is lying. But Natalie learns that the child isn't lying, and she learns that her son Charlie is also a victim of this principal, and she knows just what the court system and the police system can do to a child when they're trying to proclaim what happened to them, just because she is a criminal defense attorney and she knows firsthand, and she doesn't want to put her child through it. So she gets the bright idea that she's going to commit murder, and she knows exactly how to do it. And her husband get roped into some pretty terrible things. And this one is crazy. It was like a train wreck you just could not look away from. And Natalie and Will's marriage is seriously messed up, but so addicting to read. The first half is told through Natalie's perspective, the second half is told through Will's perspective, and then the very end is told again through Natalie's perspective. And the ending was crazy. This one was so good. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. The next book that I read is Then There Was You by Contreras. This is the first book in the Second Chances duet. I've never read anything by this author before, but I've seen them on Goodreads a few times, and so I figured I would give this author a chance since she was on Kindle Unlimited. This is a second chance romance story between Rowan and Tessa, who dated in high school. They were best friends growing up, and then they briefly dated in high school and broke up, and now it's been at least 6 years. And Rowan is still in their hometown. He's about to take over his family's business. It's like a fabric business, but there is a catch for him to take over the business. They're really conservative and say that he needs to be married in order to take over the business, but he doesn't believe in marriage, and so he wants to find someone that he can just marry by contract and not really have a love-filled marriage because he doesn't believe in love. And Tessa is back in town to sell her parents' home because both her parents no longer live there, and she has an apprenticeship that's starting in a few weeks, so she's just going to be home for a few weeks to kind of clean up loose ends. And of course her and Rowan interact with each other, and she really doesn't want to see him. You know, there's some bad blood there. And of course it's their second chance romance, but it's super angst filled and beyond angst filled. And I really didn't like the characters that much. I thought that they were both fairly immature, and the cliffhanger at the end I just saw coming. I'm 10 miles away, didn't love it. And part of me wants to finish the duet because I'm kind of curious, but part of me is like, I did not like the first book that much. It was okay. I think my favorite part is the cover. It's beautiful. Yeah, I give this one 3 stars. The last one that I have to talk about is Unseen by Karen Slaughter. This is the 7th book in the Will Trent series, so I only have one more book before the one that comes out in August. So I've just been slowly working my way through this series, and I love this series. You might not want to listen to this part of the video if you haven't read the series yet, because it might have some spoilers, but it obviously follows Will Trent, the main guy in the series. He's a Georgia Bureau Investigations agent, and currently he's undercover as a ex-con trying to get into this drug world because Lena Adams is a detective for the Macon Police Department, and she's trying to bust a major drug pin, and the only way to do so is probably to get an undercover agent, so that's where Will Trent comes in. And well, they decide to come to her house, the thugs that work for this drug guy, and attack her and her husband. And before she passes out when she's being attacked, she sees Will Trent. So clearly their paths collide, and you're kind of following both of their stories, as well as Sarah Linton, who you know from the Grant County series. She's been dating Will Trent, and Will hasn't told her that he's involved in this case because he's undercover, so he's lying to her. And basically Sarah is pretty torn because she blames Lena Adams for the death of her late husband Jeffrey Tolliver, who died in the Grant County series, and it's just a whole lot of drama with that and investigation. You're seeing through the perspectives of all three characters, and the timelines jump back and forth between before and after the attack. And this one was a little bit hard to follow because of the several perspectives and jumping of timelines, but once I got into it, I really enjoyed it. It's not my favorite of the series. Maybe I gave too much time between the last one, but not my favorite, I think, because it's more drug related rather than murder related. But I still enjoyed it. I can't wait to finish the series, and I gave this one 4 stars. So those are all the books I've read this week. Like I said, I'll link them down below. I'd love to hear if you've read them and what you are currently reading, and I will see you guys on my next one. Bye.